September 22nd, 1980. Fighter jets roar across the desert sky.
Missiles fall on sleeping cities. Along a dusty border river, young soldiers dig into trenches that will become their graves.
What begins as a sudden invasion will spiral into 8 years of fire, gas, and endless funerals. Nearly 1 million lives will be lost, entire generations will be scarred, and the Middle East will never be the same. This is the story of the Iran-Iraq War, one of the deadliest and most devastating conflicts of the 20th century. To understand how it began, we must look at the revolutions colliding.
In 1979, Iran was transformed.
The Shah was overthrown, and under the leadership of Ruhollah Khomeini, the country became an Islamic republic. The revolution sent shockwaves across the region. It was not just political, it was ideological. Iran's new leadership called for Islamic uprisings beyond its borders, directly challenging neighboring governments. To the west stood Iraq, ruled by Saddam Hussein, ambitious, calculating, and determined to dominate the Arab world. Saddam saw opportunity in Iran's turmoil. The Iranian military had been weakened by purges.
Its economy was in chaos. Ethnic tensions simmered along the border.
Most crucially, the two nations disputed control over the Shat-Ai Arab Waterway,
a vital oil shipping route. But beneath territorial disputes lay something deeper: sectarian and political rivalry.
Iraq was led by a Sunni-dominated regime, ruling over a majority Shiite population.
Iran's revolution was Shiite and openly hostile to Saddam's rule.
The fear that Iran's revolutionary message could inspire rebellion inside Iraq loomed large.
Believing Iran was vulnerable, Saddam made his move.
On September 22nd, 1980, Iraqi forces invaded.
Airstrikes targeted Iranian air bases. Armored divisions crossed the border. Saddam expected a swift victory.
A short war that would cripple Iran and elevate Iraq as the dominant Gulf power. He was wrong.
Instead of collapsing, Iran mobilized. The revolution that had destabilized the country now fueled its defense.
Volunteers flooded recruitment centers. The newly formed Revolutionary Guard fought alongside remnants of the regular army. What began as a conventional invasion hardened into a brutal war of attrition.
In the early months, Iraq captured territory. In Iran's oil-rich Khuzestan province,
cities like Khorramshahr were reduced to rubble.
But by 1982, Iran counterattacked.
Iraqi forces were pushed back across the border.
Saddam's quick victory had turned into a grinding stalemate.
And yet, the war did not end. Rather than accept a ceasefire, Iran pressed forward, aiming to topple Saddam's regime entirely. The conflict shifted into Iraqi territory.
Trench lines stretched across the desert, eerily reminiscent of World War I. Human wave assaults, sometimes involving teenage volunteers, surged toward Iraqi positions under relentless artillery fire.
The casualties mounted. Both sides deployed ballistic missiles against cities in what became known as the War of the Cities.
Tehran and Baghdad endured repeated bombardment. Civilians learned to live with air raid sirens and shattered glass.
The conflict also expanded to the Persian Gulf.
Oil tankers were attacked in the tanker war, threatening global energy supplies.
International powers watched nervously as the world's oil lifeline became a battlefield.
Then came one of the darkest chapters. Iraq began using chemical weapons, mustard gas, and nerve agents against Iranian troops and later against Kurdish civilians. Clouds of poison drifted across trenches.
Soldiers choked, blinded, their lungs burning from within. The use of chemical warfare shocked the world, yet international response was muted, shaped by Cold War calculations.
Because this was not just a regional war, it was a Cold War battleground. The United States, the Soviet Union, and several Arab states provided varying degrees of support to Iraq, fearing the spread of Iran's revolutionary ideology.
Meanwhile, Iran found itself isolated,
sanctioned, and struggling to maintain supplies.
Yet the war persisted, fueled by pride, fear, and the refusal of either side to concede.
By the mid-1980s, exhaustion set in. Economies were shattered.
Oil facilities lay in ruins.
Young men had grown up knowing nothing but war. Cemeteries expanded in both countries. In 1988, the tide turned decisively. Iraq, rearmed and reorganized, launched a series of powerful offensives. Iranian forces, drained and depleted, struggled to respond. Chemical attacks intensified.
International pressure increased. The downing of Iran Air Flight 655 by a US warship in July 1988 further escalated tensions and underscored the conflict's volatility.
Finally, after 8 years of relentless fighting, Iran accepted a United Nations ceasefire.
On August 20, 1988,
The guns fell silent.
The borders were nearly identical to where they had been in 1980. Nothing had changed except everything. Estimates of the dead range from 500,000 to over 1 million. Millions more were wounded. Entire cities were scarred. Families were shattered.
Prisoners of war would not return home for years.
For Iraq, the war left crushing debt, particularly to Kuwait and Saudi Arabia.
That financial strain would later contribute to Saddam's invasion of Kuwait in 1990, triggering the Gulf War and reshaping global geopolitics once again.
For Iran,
the war entrenched the power of the Revolutionary Guard
and reinforced a narrative of resistance and martyrdom that still shapes its politics today. The Iran-Iraq War was not a swift clash of armies. It was a slow, grinding catastrophe.
A war fueled by fear, pride, ideology, and miscalculation.
It demonstrated how regional rivalries, when mixed with global power politics, can ignite conflicts that consume generations.
Yet perhaps its most haunting legacy is how little it resolved.
No decisive victory, no dramatic surrender, just silence after years of thunder. Along the former front lines, the desert has reclaimed the trenches.
Rusted helmets lie buried beneath the sand. Memorials stand in quiet towns where young faces stare from faded photographs. They were sons, brothers, fathers.
Many were barely adults. The Iran-Iraq War reminds us that modern warfare is not always defined by sweeping victories or dramatic turning points. Sometimes it is defined by endurance, by how long nations are willing to bleed for pride, security, or survival. 8 years,
hundreds of thousands dead,
borders unchanged. A war that began with the promise of quick triumph
ended as one of the longest and bloodiest conflicts of the modern Middle East,
and its echoes still shape the region today.